Hello there. It is now obvious that the vast majority of our politicians are not only self-serving, but also utterly evil. I didn't think that the groomer scandal could get worse, but it has. And I'm not talking about the comments made by Lucy Powell, who is currently, but should have resigned, Leader of the House of Commons and the Lord President of the Privy Council, where she called raising the subject of the horrendous groomers political dog whistling and a little trumpet blowing far-right vote-grubbing exercise. No. Today, GB News explodes again onto this extremely grim groomer landscape with a report that includes network mapping showing the sheer, massive industrial scale of this vile, evil trade. Reaffirming that it covers over 50 different towns and cities, with reports coming in from Plymouth, Bristol and Banbury up to the northeast and northwest. Youngsters being trafficked across the nation, city to city, town to town. And there have only been 500 convictions since 2007. And I bet there are almost zilch convictions for covering it up against the politicians, both local and central, or the officials involved. We desperately need an urgent, fully independent, no-holds-barred national inquiry with all the legal powers it needs to follow the rabbit warren of this exploitation to the very ends. Something the Labour Party, in its quest to keep a certain demographic on board with them, will never, ever do. All our politicians, bar a very few really good people, just cover their eyes and their ears and shout blah 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 at themselves. All too difficult to deal with. Maybe the problem would go away if only the victims would just shut up for the sake of diversity and political expediency. At least we have Rupert Lowe gathering funding together to hold some sort of private inquiry, thus showing more commitment to this crisis than all but a handful of his fellow parliamentarians. Now this scandal and knife wielding have become massive, immediate crises that obviously far surpass the issue of social media hurty words. But no, our politicians don't want to take action against the hordes of knife carriers nor the groomers. And you have to wonder why, don't you? Could it be that one or two social groupings might factor highly in these foul activities? And attempting to prevent those activities would cause localised problems for the authorities. Localised problems they would be unable to counter, maybe? In the report it talks about one poor young female individual being thrown into a car boot and driven from Rotherham down to London so that debts could be paid off. What horror is that? Oh yes, Sadiq Khan's London. Do you remember when Khan refused to answer questions from his Tory mayoral election rival, Susan Hall, on this issue? In 9 successive attempts at mayor's question time, Susan Hall tried to get Khan to engage with the groomer problem. And all he could come out with was that he was not clear what she was referring to. But GB News said in its report that London was also the destination for several other trafficking reports, raising questions for City Hall after the Mayor refused requests for a London inquiry into the groomer issue in London. Now get this, the GB News report also said that there has been zero deportations of groomers identified since 2011. Now, when trawling through what's going on, it occurs to me that much of what these youngsters are subjected to could in fact fulfil the requirements for a charge of slavery under the Modern Slavery Act 2015 against the perpetrators. The Act does have a sex crime angle to it already, and the Modern Slavery Act also has a provision to protect the underaged because they can't give consent. Then there's no need to prove coercion or deception to prove the offence. But importantly, as I understand it, the maximum sentence for a groomer under the 2003 Act is 14 years. Under the Slavery Act, it's life. Now, I'm no lawyer, but you only have to look at the CPS guidance online to wonder why such slavery charges have not been laid against some of these groomers. Or would that be extremely embarrassing for the UK government to have such a role reversal of horror taking place within the UK itself? After all, in woke UK, slavery can only be a demographic one-way street, can't it? Well, no, it can't, and no, it isn't. Remember the case of the United Nations judge Lydia Mugambi, who was jailed for 6 years and 4 months for slavery in the UK, in Oxfordshire? Now, Mugambi had, according to the prosecution, exploited her victim by taking advantage of her lack of knowledge about employment rights and misleading her about why she came to the UK, says the BBC. If that qualifies for slavery, what about what our young female offspring are suffering at the hands of their exploiters? Whatever the exploiter's race, creed, or country of origin. So why wouldn't they also qualify legally as cases of slavery? Well, in the Mugambi case, the exploited person was also Ugandan, so no demographic problem there. But tens of thousands of young white females in the UK being enslaved by... Now that could prove fissionable. But I don't care about that. For the life of me, I can't see the difference. What these groomers get up to would seem to me to fit the bill where slavery is concerned, or it would only take a small tweak in the law to make it so. And looking at what our youngsters have been through, slavery would appear to me to be the most apt name for it. Except that, for the woke lefties, slavery usually only has a one-way demographic element, doesn't it? And on that basis, a charge of slavery would never do where many of the groomers are concerned, would it? And that mode of thinking probably permeates into the minds of the police, the CPS and the judiciary. But being able to slot it under sex crime may leave more loopholes, maybe. Now just think if both groomer and slavery charges were brought in tandem together with charges of false imprisonment perhaps. They could all well apply and lead to much more sensible convictions and sentencing. Once again, maybe. And all we have at the moment are promises from certain politicians that they'll hold an inquiry if they get into power in 4 years' time. Finally, please like, subscribe and comment below, and a big shout out to our Patreon supporters, and thank you for watching.